We met in the last episode two significant characters in the game, namely Dr. Tenenbaum, Jack's mother and Empress archetype, and the crazed Stein or Stone Man. Already in the last 7 episodes we've come across not just a fair bit of symbolism to ingest, but also a few esoteric schools which I've tried my best to explain but not overanalyse. As you are now, I hope, invested in this series, I thought it prudent to pause a little and give some breathing space. So far I have had to gloss over a few things in trying to keep this series moving forward, and the one I feel needs looking at again is the White Rabbit. And so rather than a typical video essay, as we've done before, I'm going to focus in this video not only on the White Rabbit, but its obvious references to Alice in Wonderland, and also the esoteric significance that this has. As a child, and even to this day, I still find the story enchanting and challenging, so let's start with refreshing our memories. Alice is a typical Victorian girl sitting by a riverbank, and whilst in a bored state, she sees a white rabbit brush past her. Following after the rabbit, she enters a hole leading underground and falls down a long strange tunnel, accompanied initially by her cat, named Dina, until finally she lands at the bottom. During this trip down, she sees all sorts of bizarre objects and realises she is in fact floating downwards as opposed to actually falling. Dinah, for the record, was the daughter of Jacob in the book of Genesis, and the name means vindicated. The cat then, who like the fool's dog is a kind of spirit guide, is vindicated of any blame, and it is the white rabbit that actually leads her astray. And so, as we know, Alice goes on a series of bizarre adventures, meeting all sorts of strange characters. These characters test her logic and her ability to see the world clearly. The world of Wonderland is upside down, topsy-turvy and inside out, and of course we can reference this to Bioshock in the sense that the world inside of Bioshock is a complete crazed underworld. So let's get back to Bioshock. So in Bioshock we have a large image of the White Rabbit, as I've already shown, next to the lady with the pram, and just in case we miss it, there is another one directly in front of us when we enter the restaurant. It is clear then that this symbol is not one the game desires us to miss. But what can we make of this? Well, before my analysis, let's also quickly look at another famous pop reference to the White Rabbit, and that's in the Gnostic 1999 classic, The Matrix. Early on in the movie, we're given the following scene which sets up the main premise of the story. This premise is that Neo's journey, just like Jack in the game of Bioshock, is a fool about to embark on a spiritual journey, which just like in the game, ends with our protagonist significantly transformed from ordinary man into an enlightened being. Neo, like Jack, has the magician's power over all the elements by the film's conclusion, and this occurs through passing the trials and tribulations of the hero's quest. Alice, however, doesn't quite meet this same fate, but we do know that by the end she has finished a transformation from child into adult in a similar vein. And so we see here Neo asleep, a little like Sleeping Beauty if we were to use a fairy tale interpretation, and is awoken by a knock at the door in which, after the message on the terminal to follow the White Rabbit, he does so after spotting the tattoo on the woman's shoulder. Neo, like Alice and Jack, begin their initiations suddenly and without warning. In all 3 cases they follow a white rabbit, as this leads them from their slumber onto their destined arduous journeys. In all 3 cases the characters have their perceptions considerably questioned and turned inside out, and in all 3 cases we see them ingest chemicals which aid in changing their physiologies. Neo the red pill, Jack the plasmids, and Alice the bottles of unknown liquids. We can posit then that entheogens are at work in all 3 scenarios, and these are clear references to the fact that initiates require help from the spirit world in order to open the doors of perception and to allow their minds to accept the bizarre reality that actually underpins our ordinary reality. The notion of following a rabbit down into a hole and then embarking on a spiritual journey in fact began in the 16th century. This was when a Paracelsian named Stefan Michael Spracher depicted this in his engraving The Alchemical Mountain, and it is therefore to this that I'd like to end this video essay with an analysis. So firstly, of course I need to highlight the rabbit being followed down the rabbit hole and then point out the esoteric symbols in the image, just like I did with the Masonic tracing board. Unlike the Masonic tracing board, this of course is an alchemical instructional piece, although we will note some similarities. This being alchemical, the concepts are a little different, but the overall philosophy is the same, that of creating an enlightened and powerful being. In this case, alchemy is the method, but the objectives are more or less the same. Here, if we zoom in, we can see two potential initiates who are yet to enter the alchemical mountain. The alchemical mountain, for the record, is not a physical mountain, but should be read from bottom to top in a similar way to the Masonic tracing board. At the bottom, therefore, are the uninitiated, one blindfolded and bumbling around, the other without blindfold and about to enter the rabbit hole. In doing so, therefore, he is about to, like all of our other characters, take his first step on his journey into ultimate enlightenment. We can see on the four corners of this image, written in Latin, the four elements again. See how we keep on finding the same concepts repeated again and again. And these are ignis, fire, aries, air, aquae, water, and terrae, signifying earth. We have seen these on the Magician's Tarot card before, and we will see them again. Once the initiate has entered, he will see above him 7 stages, which in English are labelled calcination, sublimation, solution, putrefaction, distillation, coagulation, and finally we arrive at tincture. Tincture is the fully realised pure elixir, although in reality this isn't some potion that needs to be imbibed, but represents the final stage of enlightenment. This is once man's mind and spirit have been cleansed and perfected. Alchemy, although practiced through an ancient form of chemistry, is in fact a hidden doctrine of mystical enlightenment. It was coded this way in order to avoid persecution, and enable the theory to be passed on through the generations. But I digress. Continuing upwards now to the middle of the image, we have a kind of temple which is set inside of a 3-stepped pyramid. Above it we see the sun and the moon, representing again male and female, the cycles of the day and night, or the eternal universe. We've seen this before in many images in the game where I've mentioned the opposites. Seated inside we have a red-dressed king and white-dressed queen, the rubedo and the albedo. The king holds out his sceptre, an obvious reference to the phallic, and the queen gifts a flower, an obvious reference to Mother Nature. Behind them there is a furnace on which is the instrument used in the alchemical processes that I just mentioned, and of course this alludes to the great alchemical work. Last we see above this structure a red dove, which points us again to the rubedo, which is the completed red alchemical stage. Outside of this we have 7 figures representing the major cosmological figures of Venus, Mars and the Sun on the left side, Saturn, Jupiter and the Moon on the right or lunar side, the left side being the solar bodies, the right side being the lunar bodies. Note finally we have the 12 symbols of the 12 constellations of the zodiac, representing the outer universe that looks down and governs our fate. Below them alchemical symbols representing various alchemical processes and substances can be seen. 3 of these substances are the most significant in alchemy, and these are salt, mercury and sulphur. Salt is represented by Sagittarius, and sulphur represented by Aries. Mercury, however, is not directly depicted here as being the substance that alchemically connects the physical with the spiritual world. It is made of a combination of the constellations of Gemini and Virgo. It therefore holds a major position at the top of the pyramid itself. Note also that the character of Mercury is also holding the caduceus, which I mentioned in episode 6, along with the rod of Asclepius. So in conclusion, the following of a rabbit is a symbol of initiation, and as I hope I have shown, it is no coincidence in either of these narratives. The Matrix, Alice in Wonderland, and now Bioshock are all based on Gnostic ideals whereby, rather than a human being following and being subservient to God's will, the hero becomes a god on Earth itself, and with powers beyond the ordinary sleeping person. We now have references to alchemy, astrotheology, and again connections to the tarot, whereby the similarity of the magician is also at play. Thank you for watching.